From their original homeworld of Ossus, the Jedi Knights spread far across the galaxy, fighting for peace and justice across the Republic. Over the course of their history, the Jedi established enclaves and satellite academies on many worlds, as we've discussed throughout this series. Some of these settlements were small and quickly faded into obscurity, but on other planets, especially on Force nexuses strongly attuned to the light side, the Jedi established more permanent operations, and the echoes of their presence were often felt on such worlds for centuries after the Jedi left. Today, we'll be looking at some of the most important Jedi planets, apart from Ossus, which we covered in depth earlier in this series.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
First things first, let's talk about Coruscant. After the destruction of Ossus during the Great Sith War, Coruscant became the new homeworld of the Jedi Order, but despite this distinction, the history of Jedi settlements in Galactic City was actually pretty short. Though the Jedi Order had been allied with the Galactic Republic since 25,000 BBY, for millennia it avoided establishing academies, temples, or any sort of permanent Jedi facility on the galactic capital, as the Order was, at that time, cautious about entangling itself in Senate politics. It was only in 5000 BBY, 20,000 years into the Jedi Republic alliance, that the first Jedi Enclave on Coruscant was established. This happened right after the end of the Great Hyperspace War, in which the Jedi Order defended Coruscant and the core worlds of the Republic from the forces of the Sith Empire. In gratitude for the Jedi's vital role in saving Coruscant from the Sith, the Republic gave the Jedi Order ownership of a piece of land in Galactic City as a gift. This land grant included the Sacred Spire, the peak of a mountain that was among the tallest on the planet. This mountain had been a place of worship for the ancient Coruscanti, and the Jedi were already familiar with it, as it contained a powerful Force nexus that Jedi occasionally made pilgrimages to visit. The Republic hoped that by granting the Jedi ownership of the Sacred Spire, they would construct a fortress around it, like the fortresses they had built on Ossus, which would dissuade future attacks on Coruscant. But the Jedi initially had no intentions of building such a fortress. They took possession of the Sacred Spire, but all they did at first was build some small shrines around its peak, which were home to a small number of Jedi Knights. This was the Jedi Order's only permanent presence on Coruscant for the next 1,000 years, until Ossus was destroyed in 3996 BBY. After the devastation of Ossus, the Jedi Order was rendered homeless. All the lore and artifacts that could be salvaged from Ossus were moved to Exus Station, which became the Order's temporary base of operations, but a new, more permanent Jedi capital was needed. Coruscant soon became one of the top contenders for this new capital's location. After the destruction of Ossus, 4 of the Order's greatest surviving Jedi Masters, 2 Sage Masters and 2 Warrior Masters, traveled to the Sacred Spire on Coruscant, where they decided to build a new Jedi Temple at the site, a fortress along the lines of what the Republic had originally wanted the Jedi to build on Coruscant. The new Jedi Temple, when finished, completely enclosed the Sacred Spire, and after its construction was completed, the Jedi Order formally selected it as its new headquarters, relocating most of what had been salvaged from Ossus to its archives. The Jedi Councils took up residence in the new temple, as did a great many Jedi. Over the course of the next few thousand years, the Jedi Temple steadily expanded. It was left in ruins and abandoned by the Jedi for a short while after the sacking of Coruscant during the Great Galactic War, but it was eventually reclaimed by the Jedi and rebuilt, and its steady expansion continued. Over the course of 3,000 years, the Jedi Temple was continuously rebuilt and expanded, becoming larger and larger as the Jedi Order became more centralized and Coruscant-centric. The last major bout of construction took place in the aftermath of the 7th Battle of Ruusan, 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, and it saw the temple transformed into the towering monolith we know from the films. Even by the time of the Clone Wars, the Jedi Temple precinct, which contained the temple and its surrounding support facilities, was the Jedi Order's only territory on Coruscant. Coruscant was less a Jedi planet and more a planet with some Jedi land on it. Thus, we're not going to be providing an overview of Coruscant in its entirety here. However, we will be providing a thorough overview of the Jedi Temple. Originally, it started as a collection of small shrines and libraries, but as the temple grew, new towers and outbuildings sprang up around the original complex. Eventually, all of these buildings were hidden under a massive armored sheath, becoming the temple ziggurat, with only 5 spires rising up through this great metal shell. The temple was a kilometer in height, and it was home to 10,000 Jedi by the start of the Clone Wars. It was surrounded by the Temple Court, a sprawling courtyard dotted with the statues of ancient Jedi heroes that separated the temple from the surrounding city blocks. The temple ziggurat was built in the shape of a trapezoidal prism with 4 tall piers on each side, flat on top and surrounded by a low-lying outer wall at its base. The main entrance to the temple was located at the base of the eastern pier at the end of the processional way, a large memorial road that ended in a ceremonial staircase. At the top of this staircase were statues of the 4 masters that founded the temple, whose images were also emblazoned onto the enormous stone pylons that made up the temple's formal entrance. Beyond these pylons was the Jedi Temple's enormous entrance hall, one of several massive pillared halls located at the base of the temple ziggurat. Other, smaller entrances were located at the bases of the other piers. The western and southern entrances were general access, while the northern entrance was specifically for non-Jedi visitors. The interior of the temple ziggurat was incredibly complex, a dense collection of structures of various ages. The outer sections of the ziggurat were frequented the most, while the innermost parts of the temple were largely abandoned, visited only by those Jedi Masters who knew the temple well enough to navigate its innermost reaches. The whole structure was encased in an armored durasteel sheath, which was nearly impenetrable. We're going to go through the highlights of this section in no particular order, since there isn't really another way to do it. Beyond the main entrance hall was the Great Hall of the Jedi Temple, an enormous 4-story hall, the largest in the entire structure. This hall directly led to the base of the sacred spire, the heart of the Jedi Temple. Also adjacent to the main entrance hall were the endpoints of the meditative walkway, a grand, ornate hallway that ran a circuit around the base of the Jedi Temple. Originally, this was a courtyard located directly behind the ancient exterior walls of the temple, but later renovations transformed it into an enclosed space that completely surrounded the base of the ziggurat. The interior walls of the meditative walkway were lined with a grand arcade of stained glass windows and bronzium statues, which commemorated the Great Hyperspace War and the Jedi heroes who fought in it. This was a replica of a similar arcade that had been built on Ossus, and the meditative walkway even incorporated a few windows and floor tiles that had been salvaged from one of the Ossus temples. The walkway also featured stone tablets carved with the Jedi Code, as well as small rotunda chapels in its corners. The chapel in the southeastern corner was one of the oldest parts of the temple, originally an outbuilding that was later swallowed by the main temple as part of its expansion. This chapel was used for meditation by newly selected Padawans. Above the base of the temple, several sections of old walls dating from just before the start of the new Sith Wars were preserved, hidden under the armored sheath of the modern temple. Even older sections were preserved in some of the piers. A large stone tower in the eastern pier was almost 3,500 years old, dating back to the aftermath of the Galactic Wars, and it served as a museum of temple history by the time of the Clone Wars. Located just behind this structure was a large cluster of older stone towers built in different monumental styles, all of them ancient. One of these structures was the reading room of the original Jedi Library. The library had long ago been moved elsewhere, but the reading room was preserved due to the quality of its architecture and converted into a formal banquet hall. Other ancient structures in this part of the temple had been similarly repurposed, with one large building being converted into the office of the Jedi Exploration Corps. Most of the other Jedi Service Corps had their offices in the southwestern part of the temple, which also contained lightsaber training facilities and lightsaber repair workshops. A lightsaber crafting facility, as well as another lightsaber practice gallery, was located in the northeast corner of the temple, near the top of the ziggurat. The northwestern quarter of the Jedi Temple was largely taken up by the Jedi Academy, an enormous subcomplex within the temple where initiates and Padawans were housed and trained. The northeastern quarter contained the public center, one of the few parts of the Jedi Temple that was open to the public, as well as a large number of workshops, storerooms, and maintenance facilities. The private chambers of the Jedi living in the temple were scattered all over, as were numerous other support facilities and halls. In the southeast quadrant, on the inner side of the stained glass arcade along the meditative walkway, was the Room of 1,000 Fountains, an enormous meditative garden that contained a wide variety of plant life, as well as waterfalls, streams, and fountains. The ceiling projected the image of a forest planet's daytime sky, completing the room's peaceful atmosphere. A similar system was used in the ceiling of the lake level, a 5-story section that housed an artificial lake complete with beaches, another popular meditation spot. Scattered throughout the temple's southeastern quadrant were the Sith containment cells, an ancient dungeon meant to hold captured Sith and Sith-spawn creatures. The Agricore Research Laboratory, which contained biodomes for alien flora, the Halls of Healing, a medical center ran by the Medical Corps, several training facilities, including a high-tech holographic training area used to simulate combat scenarios, and the Jedi Archives and Library. At the heart of the temple ziggurat, many of the ancient shrines on the sacred spire still remained, albeit enclosed within a large hall surrounding the base of the temple's central tower. The black rock peak of the sacred spire remained largely intact, dotted with meditation balconies and the entrances to internal cave chapels. It was surrounded by a ring of newer shrines, one of which contained a floor mosaic salvaged from Ossus. Deep within the sacred spire was the Chamber of Conclave, where representatives from the scattered Jedi enclaves met once annually to deliver reports to the Jedi High Council. The top of the temple ziggurat was flat and featured large plazas, which were sometimes used for initiate training or as landing sites for visiting delegates' ships. Several contemplation gardens were located on the roof, as were skylights that allowed sunlight into the temple, communications infrastructure, and the garages and hangars that housed the Jedi Order's arsenal of spacecraft and speeders. There were also Jedi Starfighter hangars built into the bases of 4 council towers, each with extendable landing platforms. The top of the Jedi Temple was crowned by 5 towers. The outer 4 towers housed the Jedi Councils, and they all had identical designs. Each tower had a hangar section at its base, above which were large data centers and communications control rooms. Each of the council towers doubled as a massive communications transceiver, as the bulk of each tower was dominated by extremely powerful communications infrastructure meant to allow the Jedi Councils to keep contact with Jedi on missions all across the galaxy. The antennae at the tops of each tower were some of the most sophisticated pieces of communications technology in the galaxy, located far above the tangled electromagnetic fields of Galactic City for optimal transmission quality. Some of these antennae tapped into the cosmic energy fields of the galaxy itself to broadcast and receive transmissions. The upper reaches of each tower contained a large planning room consisting of a circular walkway around a large holo-projected galaxy map suspended above the tower's hollow lower interior. 3 sets of doors connected this level to an exterior balcony that ran around the tower, which featured 3 contemplation stations, larger balconies suspended high above Galactic City. Directly above the planning room, on the highest level of each tower, was the council chamber, an open, circular room with broad windows and seating for the masters of the Jedi Councils. Each of the 4 towers was home to a different Jedi Council. The Jedi High Council met in the northeastern tower, while the Council of First Knowledge met in the southeastern tower, the Reassignment Council met in the southwestern tower, and the Council of Reconciliation met in the northwestern tower. The fifth and largest tower of the Jedi Temple was the Temple Spire, a mostly ceremonial structure built on top of the peak of the Sacred Spire. The domed base of the Temple Spire contained this ancient mountain's peak, which was ringed by two balconies. The lower balcony was lined with hollow projectors that generated images showcasing the history of the Jedi Order, and it was where the youngest Jedi initiates were brought to start their education. The upper balcony was for meditation on the Force Nexus contained within the mountain. Above the peak, the Temple Spire mostly consisted of a hollow space ringed with balconies, within which floated statues of the most revered Jedi, suspended on repulsor lift pads. There were also 3 final chambers at the top of the Temple Spire. The lowest was a set of meditation chambers where Padawans spent the night before their knighting in meditation on the Force. Above this was the Hall of Knighthood, a larger chamber with 4 fin-like wings that extended out from the main structure of the temple. This was where the Jedi High Council typically carried out knighting ceremonies, and it was also where knights were raised to the title of Jedi Master. Above the Hall of Knighthood was the Pinnacle Room, a windowed room reminiscent of the council chambers in the other towers. Access to the Pinnacle Room was restricted, for this chamber housed the most ancient Jedi texts in a carefully controlled environment. This was the Jedi Order's most sacred site, the highest point of the Jedi Temple. After Ossus and Coruscant, by far the most important Jedi planet was Ilum, a frigid world in the unknown regions. Accessible only by a secret Jedi hyperlane from Metalos in the core worlds, Ilum was remote, obscure, and closely guarded by the Jedi. The planet was inhospitable, and even at the Jedi Order's height, only a few Jedi, if any, were permanently stationed on the planet. Most of Ilum's surface was covered in ice, home only to a few hardy plants and animals. It was a small, lonely world far from civilization, orbiting a blue dwarf star, and from orbit it appeared entirely insignificant. But those who ventured into the vast caverns below the planet's surface could immediately see that Ilum was anything but insignificant, as the planet's caverns were packed full of Force-attuned crystals. These crystals were what made Ilum one of the most important Jedi worlds. The Jedi discovered Ilum all the way back in 22,800 BBY, during the earliest millennia of the Order's history. That year, a Jedi scout tracked the planet's strong Force signature through hyperspace, blazing a route from Metalos out into the unknown regions. She relayed her discovery back to the Jedi High Council, which dispatched survey teams from Ossus to scout out the planet. One of these teams accidentally discovered the crystal caves while seeking refuge from local predators, and following this discovery, the Jedi Order claimed Ilum for its own. Initially, the Jedi Order kept Ilum a closely guarded secret. They didn't report its discovery to the Senate, erased all mention of it from official databases and records, and kept the route to the planet secret too. Over the millennia, the word of Ilum's existence leaked out, but the Jedi were nonetheless able to prevent outsiders from finding the planet for most of their history. Once Ilum was secure, the Jedi built several temples, shrines, and enclaves across the planet, which became popular pilgrimage sites for wandering Jedi Knights. Originally, Ilum was just another pilgrimage site for the Jedi, as it wasn't until 13,000 years after Ilum's discovery that the Jedi began to build the first lightsabers. Even then, the crystals found on Ilum were only some of the many varieties of lightsaber crystals the Jedi used to craft their weapon, and they weren't even the most popular kinds. However, Adagan crystals, which were found on Ossus and the other worlds of the Adega system, were originally the most popular as they were highly attuned to the Force, to the point where Jedi could sense their locations, and they also produced higher quality blades than most other crystals. However, Adagan crystals were rare, even on Ossus, and as a result, Ilum crystals steadily became a more popular choice. Ilum crystals produced lightsaber blades of a similarly high quality to Adagan crystals, but they had less prominent Force signatures, which meant that Jedi couldn't sense their locations as they could with Adagan crystals. Ilum crystals also only ever produced blue, green, or very rarely purple blades, in contrast to Adagan crystals, which could produce blades of a much larger variety of colors. Despite their inferior quality, however, Ilum crystals became increasingly popular due to the sheer volume of them present in the crystal caves of Ilum. They were far more common than Adagan crystals, and consequently, they began to become the most popular kind of lightsaber crystal in the years leading up to the Great Sith War. The Great Sith War sealed the deal, as the destruction of the Adaga system meant that Adagan crystals became extremely rare. Over the course of the next few thousand years, Ilum became the primary source of lightsaber crystals for Jedi. Initiates and Padawans looking to build their first lightsabers traveled to Ilum itself as part of the Gathering, a ritual in which young Jedi would venture into the crystal caves to locate and bond with a crystal, which they would use to build their first lightsabers. The Jedi also harvested larger batches of Ilum crystals for storage in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, so that older Jedi whose lightsabers had been destroyed or wanted to build a new lightsaber for whatever reason didn't have to go all the way back to Ilum to start over. There were many sets of crystal caves on Ilum, most with their own shrines, Jedi enclaves or temples, most of which had few, if any, permanent residents. The largest and most significant Jedi site on Ilum, however, was the Ilum Temple, which was where the Gathering was held. The temple was built over the largest set of crystal caves, which ran for tens of thousands of kilometers deep under one of Ilum's mountain ranges. The cave system was volcanic in nature and had walls of black rock, which were dotted with blue, green, and purple Ilum crystals. The full extent of the crystal caves was never mapped, and the sheer volume of Ilum crystals created a powerful force nexus within the cave. This nexus caused hallucinations and disorientation in those who entered the caves, and as a result, some of the Jedi who ventured into these caves never came out, ending up lost forever deep in the labyrinth. Some Jedi who entered the crystal caves were unable to see any other crystals apart from one that called to them, while others experienced more vivid hallucinations. When Anakin Skywalker traveled to the caves to build his first lightsaber, he came face to face with a vision of Darth Maul, which he had to battle and defeat to complete his lightsaber. The Ilum Temple was located at the mouth of the crystal caves, and it was a fairly simple structure, if ornate and ancient. The temple was carved into the stone of the mountainside, its interior lit by sunlight from large transparisteel windows built into the structure's western face. The external entrance to the temple led into the main chamber, a large hall adorned with the statues of Jedi. Circular windows in the upper wall of this hall allowed sunlight into the room, which was refracted through a large crystal suspended from the ceiling. This crystal was used to melt an ice sheet on the eastern wall, allowing passage into the crystal caves beyond. The Ilum Temple also contained numerous storerooms, workshops, and meditation chambers that branched off from the main structure, though by the time of the Clone Wars, they were rarely visited. Another prominent Jedi world was Tython, the original birthplace of the Jedi Order. Tython was a beautiful, verdant world in the deep core, with a strong connection to the Force. And in the pre-Republic era, it was home to the Jedi Order, the predecessors of the Jedi. The Jedi Order was destroyed in a schism between the adherents of the light side and the dark side toward the end of the pre-Republic era, and the Jedi Order was formed by the victorious Lightsiders, who abandoned Tython for Ossus due to the devastation the Force Wars had inflicted upon the planet. Tython was abandoned for more than 20,000 years, but it was rediscovered by the Jedi around the time of the Galactic Wars. The Jedi relocated to Tython after the Jedi Temple on Coruscant was destroyed in the sacking of Coruscant, and the planet once more became their headquarters for a short while during this period. We won't go into depth about the Jedi Temples of Tython in this video, as we've discussed them extensively in the past, and they were long abandoned ruins in the time of the Jedi. These ruins were just one kind of evidence of the ancient wars that had been fought on Tython. The planet was also haunted by Sith-spawned monsters and the mutated descendants of ancient Rakatan cast-offs. Indeed, while Tython was immensely strong in the Force, it was not strictly a bastion of the light side. The dark side was strong on parts of this planet, lurking in the depths of its caves or the hearts of its forests. But the light side was strong on Tython as well, and many Jedi found peace in its beautiful plains, forests, and mountains, despite the turmoil that gripped the outside galaxy. During their brief return to Tython, the Jedi established a few of their own facilities on the planet, most notably a new Jedi Temple. This temple was much smaller and simpler than the one in Coruscant, and it was built of local timber and stone atop the ruins of an older Jedi structure. Nonetheless, this temple was sufficient to serve as the Jedi Order's main base of operations and the new home of the Jedi Councils. Drawing on the designs of Bomar monasteries, the new temple consisted of 3 rounded cupolas built around a larger central one surrounded by outbuildings and support facilities. The temple itself contained quarters for the Jedi who lived there, the archives and Jedi library, the meeting chambers of Jedi councils, map rooms, lecture halls, storerooms, workshops, memorials, meditation chambers, and much more, while other facilities, such as the Master's Retreat, were located in the region around the temple proper. The Jedi Order's facilities on Tython were simple, but elegant and functional, the latter of which was especially important in the Galactic Wars. It provided a suitable base of operations for the Jedi Order until the original Jedi Temple could be rebuilt, following which the Jedi relocated their headquarters back to Coruscant. It's unknown if the Jedi Temple on Tython was abandoned following this relocation, or if it remained active as a satellite academy for some time afterwards. Either way, it was ultimately destroyed during the new Sith Wars, when the Sith Lord Belia Darzu transformed Tython into a barren, ashen wasteland saturated with the dark side, erasing all trace of the Jedi and Jedi before them from the planet. During an earlier stage of the old Sith Wars, Dantooine served a similar role for the Jedi Order, acting as a hidden redoubt and auxiliary headquarters during the Mandalorian Wars and Jedi Civil War. Dantooine was a remote and largely unspoiled planet in the far outer rim, home to only a few scattered settlers and farmers. Its surface was dominated by grasslands, and while it wasn't the most potent Force nexus, the light side had a presence there, allowing Jedi to easily find peace on Dantooine's surface. There were even crystal caves on Dantooine, though they were small and prowled by dangerous Kinrath spiders. Like Coruscant, Dantooine wasn't a Jedi-exclusive world, as will be the case for most of the other planets we'll be discussing going forward. However, it was home to a Jedi Enclave, the most important Jedi Enclave at that. As we discussed earlier in this series, Jedi Enclaves were satellite facilities governed by their own small Jedi councils, which answered to the Jedi High Council on Coruscant, but largely operated independently. Jedi operating out of the Enclaves typically answered to the Enclave Council first, rather than to the Jedi High Council, and as such, the Enclaves were more like the headquarters of separate branches of the Jedi Order than simple outposts. The Jedi Enclave on Dantooine was the most important one, however. It was one of the largest and best maintained, and was highly important to the Order as a whole. Most of the Masters that sat on its ruling council sat on the High Council as well. At the time of the Enclave's destruction, the Masters of its Jedi Councils were Jar Lestin, who oversaw the instruction of apprentices and Padawans, Master Dorak, the chronicler of the Enclave and overseer of its archives, Vanda Tokare, a member of the High Council, and Vruk Lamar, who oversaw relations with the people of Dantooine. The Dantooine Jedi Enclave was a somewhat small and low-lying structure built according to the architectural norms of Dantooine settlers. The main facility consisted of 3 large rounded stone structures with fin-like protrusions, most of them open to the sky. The largest of these was a hangar where Jedi ships could land and be serviced. Several shops, including an Aratech mercantile, were also located in the hangar complex. The hangar was connected to the main building of the Enclave by a winding passage which led roughly north. This main building was circular, dominated by a central garden area open to the sky, which contained trees and small pools. From the central hub of the main building, 2 long wings stretched off north and east. The east wing contained a passage that led to the Enclave's main entrance, while the north wing contained the Enclave's dormitories. To the west of the Enclave's hub was the smallest of the 3 main buildings, which contained the circular chamber where the Enclave Council met. Attached to this chamber was a set of training rooms. The main doors of the Enclave led out to a small courtyard which lay along the banks of a river. A bridge led over this river into the Dantooine outback, which was sparsely populated and full of wild Kath hounds. On the north end of the courtyard, at the tip of the north wing of the Enclave's central building, was a set of doors that led down into the Enclave sublevel, an underground section that was unconnected to the above-ground parts of the Enclave. The sublevel was massive, and it contained storerooms, workshops, additional dormitories, lecture halls, the droid maintenance bay, the Enclave's main computer room, a set of meditation gardens, and the Enclave archives. The existence of the Dantooine Enclave was kept a closely guarded secret by the Jedi Order during the Old Sith Wars, meant for use as a last redoubt should the Jedi Temple on Coruscant come under threat. Consequently, it was run by some of the Order's most powerful Jedi Masters, and while new Jedi were sometimes trained at the Enclave, only the best and brightest recruits, those all but guaranteed to become Jedi Knights, were trained on Dantooine to keep the secret from leaking out. As a result, the Jedi on Dantooine represented the best of the Order, and Jedi who had been trained at the Enclave were held in particular regard. During the Mandalorian Wars and Jedi Civil War, the Jedi Enclave became an increasingly important redoubt for the Jedi. During the latter war, Dantooine became the Jedi Order's de facto headquarters as the Sith were encroaching ever closer to the core worlds. This increased importance led to tragedy as Dantooine was attacked by Darth Malak toward the end of the Jedi Civil War, and the Jedi Enclave was destroyed. Over the next 500 years, its ruins were thoroughly plundered by salvagers, and though the last masters of the High Council briefly attempted to rebuild the Enclave during the Dark Wars, the project ended after they were killed by Darth Traya, and the Dantooine Jedi Enclave was ultimately abandoned for good. The Jedi Agricultural Corps later established a small facility on Dantooine, but it was separate from the old Enclave and much smaller. Most of the other known Jedi facilities scattered across the galaxy were small and mostly similar to Dantooine, so from this point forward we're going to pick up the pace a little and start discussing the remaining Jedi worlds and categories, beginning with the other Jedi Enclaves. These were all mostly the same as the Enclave on Dantooine, small redoubts meant to act as remote strongholds, academies for gifted students, and defensive bastions on the frontiers of the Republic. The oldest known Jedi Enclaves were located on Hashimut and Falang Minor, which were once fortress worlds along the Republic's borders with the Tython cluster, watchposts from which the Jedi kept an eye on the Taiwanese pirate states with which the Republic fought its first war. These enclaves were likely abandoned after the Taiwanese War of 24,000 BBY, but the Jedi Order established many other enclaves on the Republic's borders over the years, such as the Taris Jedi Tower, which was established as an outpost on the borders of Mandalorian space. There were also enclaves on worlds closer to the Republic's heart. Corellia, for instance, was home to the Green Jedi Enclave. Other Jedi Enclaves were located on Genarius, Bespin, Umbria, Aloxel, Mustafar, Kolarin, and Dorin. The Dorin Enclave was jointly run by the Jedi Order and the Barando Sages. Other Jedi planets were home to Jedi Praexiums or Academies, which were satellite facilities devoted primarily to the training of Jedi. Praexiums were small facilities that typically trained only a few Jedi at a time, usually under the tutelage of only one Jedi Master. Such outposts existed on Arcania, Masposhane, Truine, Boltim, and Teia 4. Jedi Praexiums largely became a thing of the past after the Great Sith War, however, and most satellite training facilities in later eras were Jedi Academies, which were larger and better staffed. The most important Jedi Satellite Academy was the Kamparus Jedi Training Center, which was overseen by Master Yaddle and was where the legendary Master Joris Sibaoth was trained. Other major academies were the Kulu Memorial Center on Alpha Redes and the Almas Academy on Almas. Other academies were located on Harath, Bafash, Telos 4, Obra Sky, Shidumad, and Socorro. Some of these academies were known for promoting heterodox teachings. The Masters of the Almas Academy, for instance, strayed from Jedi doctrine in quite a few ways, while the entire membership of the Bafash Jedi Training Center fell to the dark side during the Clone Wars. There were also Jedi chapter houses, which served as small outposts and way stations rather than academies in their own right. There were Jedi chapter houses on Tanab, Aileen Minor, Rinal, and Marfa. Lastly, there were a few planets with Jedi temples or libraries of their own. These were usually pilgrimage sites rather than dwellings, but some had permanent staff and doubled as chapter houses or facilities of another sort. The Dawn Temple on Spintir and the Halls of Knowledge on Fatim were examples of this. The former was a prison for Jedi who had fallen to the dark side, while the latter was a Jedi library and storehouse that had once housed the largest collection of Force-imbued artifacts in the galaxy. Examples of more ordinary Jedi temples included the Temple of Edith on Deveron, the Kamas Jedi Temple on Kamas, the Temple Akablas on Oratera, and the Lost City of the Jedi, a secret outpost the Jedi had built on Yavin 4 after the end of the Great Sith War. Well, that about wraps it up. That's our look at all the major Jedi planets, as well as a more cursory survey of all the other Jedi facilities in the galaxy. But what do you think? Let us know if you'd like to see individual videos about any of these places, except the Coruscant Jedi Temple, because I think we've said enough about that one. Anyways, let us know all your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.